professor of ours, Elaine Becker, wrote this story about an experience that she had had many, many years ago now. Have you ever wanted to meet a celebrity so much that you planned exactly where you needed to be to make it happen? Many years ago, while living in Bermuda, I had the opportunity to see the Queen. After researching her itinerary, I calculated that my best chance to see her would be when she switched from traveling by car to carriage. That switch was to take place at the courthouse just down the road from my office. I made my way to the spot, and to my amazement, the plan worked. When the Queen emerged, I was able to snap a photo from 4 feet away. It was quite a thrill. Well, in our text this afternoon, we read of someone else who went out of his way to see an important person. He, too, desperately wanted to see a celebrity, Jesus, a local celebrity, who was traveling through town. He, too, waited in the best possible place in the hope of seeing Jesus as he passed by. He, too, was thrilled with the outcome, and his name was Zacchaeus. In this passage, Luke writes of how meeting Jesus changed Zacchaeus' life. Zacchaeus was a tax collector. As a matter of fact, he was not just a tax collector, he was a chief tax collector. Now, to understand the importance of that statement, one has to appreciate the social standing of tax collectors within the Jewish society at this time. They were hated. They were usually Jewish men who had turned their backs on their own people by working for the Gentiles. They worked for the Roman Empire, which at that time ruled over the Jews. The tax collectors were therefore considered to be betrayers, and they were unclean because of their contact with Gentiles. But there was even more. They were also considered thieves. You see, the position of a tax collector was often bought. The man looking for this position would buy it from the Roman Empire, and then he would make his money back and lots more beside by collecting the taxes from his fellow Jews. And of course, this left the door wide open for abuse, and that was what happened in most cases. The tax collectors would charge much more than was necessary, and they became rich from their cheating. Now, Zacchaeus was a chief tax collector, so we can assume that he was in charge over a larger area than the average tax collector. And this may be why Luke stresses that Zacchaeus was rich, he was wealthy. He was expressing to his readers the position which Zacchaeus held and the contempt in which the people held him. Now, as a result of this, I think that Zacchaeus lived a life of loneliness and emptiness. Zacchaeus would not have been loved or appreciated or even wanted. He would have been shunned. He would have been passed over by his fellow Jews. He would not have been allowed in the temple, and he would have been considered a sinner. He was hated. Now, Zacchaeus also had another problem. Verse 3 tells us that he was short. This probably increased the negative way in which others treated him, and would probably have led to a lot of self-esteem issues and feelings of inferiority. The combination of these problems must have forced Zacchaeus to live a life of misery. A life filled with loneliness and with emptiness, maybe even bitterness, desperation, and despair. I think there are times when we too feel like Zacchaeus. There are times when we are feeling alone and unloved, unwanted, unappreciated, maybe even desperate. I think that there are times when our circumstances lead us to believe that things will never change for us. Times when we feel that the answers to our deepest questions and our problems will never be solved or answered. There are times when we feel that we are stuck in a life of misery and we cannot find hope for a better future. But the good news coming to us today is that we can live a life filled with hope and with joy and with love when we experience the transforming power of our relationship with Jesus Christ. So the question then is, how can we experience this relationship with Jesus? And our text this afternoon suggests 2 steps. First, we seek him. Zacchaeus sought for Jesus. He had obviously heard of Jesus before that day and was interested enough to seek him out. The text reads that Zacchaeus wanted to know who Jesus was. He had probably heard about Jesus, how he healed and how he taught as he traveled around, but Zacchaeus wanted to know Jesus himself, to experience who he was, to see for himself. And so he went to the spot where the crowd was waiting for Jesus. The crowd, however, had no intention of letting Zacchaeus through. I can imagine the scene this way, one of excitement. People talk of the mighty miracle worker who's coming into town. But when Zacchaeus enters the scene, there's a switch in emotion. People don't want him there. "Keep that cheater out of here," someone shouts, and he's pushed to one side. "Well, I surely don't want him near me," another exclaims, and he's pushed again. He knows it's useless for him to try to get any closer through this crowd. And so he tries to look over the crowd. He stretches his neck up high, but it's no use. He's too short. He may be an outcast who's not wanted in the crowd, and he may be too short to see over the crowd, but he desperately wants to see Jesus. So he thinks, yeah, there's still a way. He remembers that there's a tree growing to the side of the road just a little way up. And he runs for it, and he reaches the tree, and he looks up into the branches. It's a sycamore fig tree. It's known for its inferior figs that are used by poor families. Zacchaeus grabs a branch, and he swings into the tree. He climbs as far as he dare, and then he settles down to watch for Jesus. Imagine the wealthy tax collector in his fancy, expensive clothing settling down into a tree of the common folk at that. The custom of the day declared that this type of behavior was very undignified, but Zacchaeus just doesn't care. He's desperate to see Jesus. Deep down, he knows that Jesus will answer all his problems. He's the answer to all his fears and to his loneliness. And so he seeks out Jesus. When we want answers to something, we seek until we find them. When a bomb goes off in some part of our world today, teams of people from all over the world begin searching for answers. Crews of firefighters and police and rescue workers and scientists, they comb the area searching for clues. They turn over every piece of evidence. They examine every thread they can find, because just like Zacchaeus, they're desperate for answers to their questions. They're not going to stop until it all makes sense. In Jeremiah 29:13, we read the words of God saying, "You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart." That's what happened to Zacchaeus. As Jesus walked down the road, he came to the tree, and he stopped. Jesus looked up into the tree, and he called out Zacchaeus' name. Jesus knew he was there, and he knew why he was there. And Jesus called out to Zacchaeus, "Come down immediately, because I want to go to your house, Zacchaeus." Jesus knew that Zacchaeus was seeking for him. He knew that nothing in Zacchaeus' life was worth living for. He knew that all his wealth and his power, they couldn't bring real joy or real contentment. And so Jesus allowed Zacchaeus to find him. When we are facing times in our lives when we are feeling desperate for answers, or for love, or for forgiveness, or for hope, we too can seek out Jesus. We can look for and know that he is waiting to be found. We can seek Jesus and find him when we seek him with all of our heart. So we too can experience Jesus when we seek him. Second, we can experience a relationship with Jesus when we accept his invitation. Jesus called out to Zacchaeus and told him, "Come down from the tree. I must stay at your house today," Jesus declared. That statement did two things. It told the people who were watching and grumbling that Jesus accepts all people unconditionally. It does not matter what the world may think of you, Jesus loves you. The crowd wanted nothing to do with Zacchaeus' sinner, but Jesus, he wanted everything to do with Zacchaeus, his child. And it is the same for each one of us. The second thing Jesus' statement did was to extend an invitation to Zacchaeus to begin a relationship with Jesus. Here is where Zacchaeus' transformation happens. Verse 6 tells us that Zacchaeus came down at once and welcomed him gladly. It was at that point that Zacchaeus decided to trust Jesus, to accept his invitation to relationship. And once he began that relationship with Jesus, everything in his world changed. Zacchaeus received salvation. He began a new life. We read in verse 8 how Zacchaeus declares he would give half of his possessions to the poor and repay 4 times the amount of anything that he had stolen. Well, Zacchaeus' salvation did not come because he did this. Zacchaeus' salvation came as a result of his response to Jesus' invitation to come into relationship. But because of that response, because of that relationship, all of a sudden Zacchaeus experienced a new life, a new sense of peace and contentment. And because of that experience, he wanted to give back to those around him. He wanted to repay those he had cheated. Not so he could receive salvation, but because he already had it. And he had this desire to change and to make things right. Zacchaeus experienced a transformation in his life because he accepted Jesus' invitation into relationship. Imagine for a moment that you knew someone who was hungry. They had no food, no money to buy any. You knew this, and so you prepared a big basket of food and you tucked an envelope of money into it and you brought it to their door. But when they answered the door, they refused to accept it. Their pride stood in the way and they refused to accept the gift that would save their life. How disappointing for all involved. You walk away feeling discouraged because you have the means of helping someone. And they close the door disappointed because they realize their hope just walked away from them. Your gift becomes useless if they refuse to accept it. Well, in Revelation chapter 3, verse 20, it records Jesus' words as, "Here I am. I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with him and he with me." You see, Jesus wants nothing better than to have his invitation, his gift, accepted. He has the power to help us. He has the power to save lives. When he spoke to Zacchaeus that day, Zacchaeus responded positively, and we can do the same. We can experience the power of Jesus' transforming salvation when we first seek for him, and second, when we accept his gift, his invitation to join him in relationship. There is an old German fable that tells of a poor fisherman and his crude hut. The hut was small and dark and drafty and bare. He didn't own much furniture, and most people thought that his place was not even worth looking at. But one day when he was out fishing, he came across a silver lamp, and he took it home, and he shined it up, and he lit it. And once it was lit, everything in his house was transformed into silver. The flooring, the logs that formed the walls of his home, the roof, and even the few pieces of furniture he owned, everything turned to silver. The light of one beautiful lamp transformed his dark and his ugly home. The same is true of our lives. The salvation of Jesus can transform our lives. All those things in our lives which are dark or unholy and ugly, they can be transformed. We can be made anew. We can be changed and recreated into a beautiful vessel of God's design. He can take away our loneliness, our emptiness, our despair. He can fill us with joy and with love and with peace and with hope. But just like Zacchaeus, we have to accept Jesus' offer. Today he is here standing at the door of your heart, and he wants to come into your home and eat with you. He wants to take your pain, your fear, your unworthiness, transform you. He wants to show you how much you are loved and cherished and appreciated and wanted. He knows of the struggles within each of our hearts today. And he knows that if you are willing, he will walk with you through everything. You just have to accept the invitation. Zacchaeus searched for Jesus, and Jesus allowed himself to be found. Jesus invited Zacchaeus into a relationship with himself, and Zacchaeus responded positively. And because of that, it transformed his life. And this afternoon, Jesus is here. He's inviting you to join him in relationship. So what will your answer be? Are you ready to give Jesus your all? To turn everything over to him and let him transform you? Jesus is waiting to transform you through the power of his salvation, his love and forgiveness. Will you say yes? Today, as you think about your decision, we're going to sing Song 458.